Outwork all these young guns snapping up jobs? Sure, but it comes at a cost. I've pushed myself to the absolute limit, functioning on barely any sleep. 4 years ago, I was working for a warehouse in North Dakota, a state known for its flat terrain, which makes trucking a bit easier. But that also meant that skipping out on sleep could mean the difference between keeping my job and getting the sack. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in May. The start of the week meant more loads needed to be shipped, which meant more work for me. I wanted to knock it all out in one shot, so I traced my route into Montana, planning not to stop even once to sleep. I hit the road a few hours after lunch, expecting to reach my destination early the next morning. I pushed the semi as much as possible, maybe a couple of miles over the speed limit. But as the clock ticked past midnight, I found myself rubbing the crust from my eyelids, struggling to keep my eyes open. My buddy Tristan had introduced me to smelling salts when I first started out. If you don't know, they're basically crystals in a little bottle. One sniff, and you're wide awake. But too many. That could be dangerous. I took a big whiff, and the adrenaline shot through my body. I hoped it would last the rest of the drive. Half an hour passed, and I was really struggling. I felt myself dozing off when suddenly, the blare of my truck drifting into the shoulder jolted me awake. This was getting dangerous. I had to pull off. I was all alone on the highway, and there was nowhere to pull off, just woods on either side. I slowed down, desperately searching for a place to stop. My headlights pierced through the darkness, revealing something that confused me, a purple dress lying in the middle of the road. What the hell? I blinked several times, convinced I was hallucinating. But it was real. I rolled by the dress, and in hindsight, that should have been a red flag. But I was too exhausted to process it. About 200 yards later, I passed a pair of shoes. Now I was starting to freak out. What was going on? I prayed there would be a place to pull off soon. My old man, David, was a super religious guy, so I clutched his old cross, hoping for guidance. A little further up, I saw more random clothing, some looked like kids' clothes. Panic set in. Something was very, very wrong. I sat in the driver's seat, expecting something to happen, but nothing did. My instincts kicked in, and I stepped out of the truck to inspect the clothing. I remember the chilly morning air piercing my skin, which definitely helped my exhaustion. As I approached the pile, I saw it was indeed kids' clothing, both boy and girl pieces. I looked around into the woods, but I couldn't see much in the darkness. My head was on a swivel, worried this was some kind of trap. Just then, I heard a crunch from the left. I whipped around, trying to see what was there. I stood still, waiting for another sound. After about 30 seconds, I heard another crunch, this time from the opposite side of the road. My survival instincts kicked in, and I sprinted back to the truck. I jumped into the front seat, but just before I slammed the door, I heard a child's scream ring out. I froze, my heart racing. I was caught in a crossroads, fight or flight. I wasn't going to confront whoever was out there, but I couldn't just abandon some helpless kids either. Before I could make a decision, another almost identical child's scream rang out, echoing through the stillness of the night. Without thinking, I turned the truck on and pointed its nose toward the spot in the woods where I heard the noise. My headlights cut through the darkness, revealing about 30 yards into the woods. I saw 3 or 4 figures, one of whom was holding a massive speaker. They ducked behind a couple of trees as my truck lit them up, but I caught just enough of a glimpse to understand what was happening. They were trying to lure me into the woods with fake kid screams. I was in shock, just sitting there, staring at the trees where they had hidden. My heart raced as I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I could finish dialing, I heard a loud thump from the back of the truck. Someone had thrown something from the other direction. I was done. I turned back to face the road and slammed on the gas, speeding away from that nightmare. As I drove, I could make out a figure on the other side of the road. They shouted something I couldn't understand before launching another object at my truck. I heard a crack as it hit the passenger side window. I drove the final hour in silence, my mind racing, too scared to process what had just happened. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. There was no way in hell I was stopping to sleep in those woods. I completed my delivery and then crashed. I must have slept for 10 hours straight, completely exhausted. When I woke up, the first thing I did was call the police. They assured me they would investigate those woods and keep me updated. As I thought about the whole ordeal, I couldn't help but feel stupid for getting out of my truck. I should have just minded my own business. But the thought of some kids being kidnapped, or worse, was just too much for me to ignore. To this day, I still have no idea what those people were trying to do. Why didn't they just rush me when they had the chance? What were they planning if I had run into the woods after the kids? In all my years of being a trucker, nothing has ever come close to being as strange or downright terrifying as that experience. That night changed me. I learned that the road can be unpredictable, and sometimes, the scariest things aren't the long hours or the isolation, but the unknown lurking just out of sight. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, always looking over my shoulder, questioning every stop I made. Now, every time I hit the road, I carry that night with me. It serves as a reminder to stay alert, to trust my instincts, and to never take my safety for granted. The road may be lonely, but I know I'm not alone in facing its challenges. So, to all my fellow truckers out there, remember, the road is full of surprises, both good and bad. Stay safe, stay aware, and don't let the isolation eat at your mind. We're all in this together.